The courtroom fell silent as the heavy oak doors swung open. Lily Dawson, just 12 years old, walked in with her head held high, her short brown hair framing a face that showed no trace of fear or remorse. She wore an orange jumpsuit that seemed too bright against the somber wood paneling of the Virginia courtroom. This was Eastville's most shocking crime in its 200-year history. The daughter of Sheriff Thomas Dawson stood accused of murdering her entire family. Her father, her mother Sarah, and her 7-year-old brother Marcus, all dead in one horrific night. But Lily did not look like a girl haunted by tragedy. She looked like someone who owned the room. Her defense team would claim it was an accident, a terrible misunderstanding born from fear and confusion. The prosecution knew better. They had evidence, one piece of undeniable proof that would tear apart every lie Lily had carefully constructed. By the time that evidence appeared on the screen before the jury, Lily's performance would be over, and the mask would finally fall. The arraignment began on a cold Monday morning in November. Judge Harold Brennan, a man with silver hair and decades of experience, sat behind the bench with his hands folded. He had presided over countless cases, but never one quite like this. The victim's family had been pillars of the community. Sheriff Dawson had served for 15 years, respected and admired. His wife Sarah had taught 3rd grade at Eastville Elementary. Young Marcus had been on the Little League team, always smiling, always full of energy. And now they were gone, and their daughter sat in the defendant's chair with a look of casual disinterest. The bailiff stood. "All rise. The court is now in session." The Honorable Judge Harold Brennan presiding. Everyone stood. Lily rose slowly, almost lazily, as if this were an inconvenience rather than a trial for her life. "Please be seated," Judge Brennan said. His voice was measured, professional. He looked down at the paperwork before him, then up at Lily. "Miss Dawson, you stand accused of 3 counts of first-degree murder. How do you plead?" Her defense attorney, Martin Cross, a thin man in his 50s with wire-rimmed glasses, stood quickly. "Not guilty, Your Honor. My client maintains her innocence." Lily glanced at the cameras positioned around the courtroom. Her lips curved into the faintest hint of a smile. She knew the media had descended on Eastville like locusts. Every major news outlet wanted a piece of this story. The pretty young girl, the murdered family, the small town torn apart. It was perfect television. The prosecutor, Elizabeth Hart, stood next. She was in her early 40s, with dark hair pulled back in a severe bun and a reputation for being relentless. "Your Honor, the state intends to prove beyond any reasonable doubt that the defendant, Lily Dawson, did willfully and with premeditation murder her father, mother, and younger brother on the night of October 15th. The evidence will show that this was not an accident, not self-defense, but a calculated act of violence." Judge Brennan nodded. "The trial will commence 2 weeks from today. Bail is denied given the severity of the charges. The defendant will remain in custody at the Juvenile Detention Center." Lily's smile faltered for just a second, but she recovered quickly. She turned to look at her attorney as the bailiff approached to escort her out. "This is ridiculous," she whispered, loud enough for the microphones to catch. "They have nothing." But Martin Cross did not look confident. He gathered his papers, his jaw tight, and watched his young client being led away. In the weeks leading up to the trial, Detective Robert Mason worked around the clock. He had been first on the scene that terrible night, called to the Dawson home by a frantic neighbor who heard screaming. What he found inside would haunt him forever. Sheriff Dawson lay in the master bedroom, his skull crushed by repeated blows. Sarah Dawson was in the hallway, as if she had tried to run. Young Marcus was found in his own bed, never having had a chance to escape. And Lily had been sitting calmly in the living room when they arrived, her clothes clean, her hands folded in her lap. "I do not know what happened," she had told them, her voice steady. "I was in my room. I heard noises. When I came out, they were already dead." But Detective Mason was not fooled. He had seen killers before, young and old, and something about Lily's composure set off every alarm in his head. He began investigating, pulling phone records, searching her room, talking to friends and teachers. What he discovered painted a very different picture than the frightened child Lily pretended to be. The trial began on a gray December morning. The courtroom was packed with spectators, journalists, and the few remaining members of the Dawson extended family. Sarah's sister, Margaret, sat in the front row, her eyes red from weeks of crying. She clutched a tissue in her hand and stared at Lily with a mixture of grief and rage. Lily entered the courtroom with that same unsettling confidence. She had grown thinner during her time in detention, but her eyes were bright and alert. She scanned the crowd, taking in the cameras, the reporters scribbling in their notebooks, the people who had come to watch her fate unfold. Elizabeth Hart stood to give her opening statement. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you are about to hear over the coming days will disturb you. It will shake your faith in humanity, because the evidence will show that Lily Dawson, this 12-year-old girl sitting before you, planned and executed the murder of her entire family, not in a moment of panic, not in self-defense, but with cold, calculated precision." She paced before the jury box, making eye contact with each juror. "The defense will try to convince you that this was a tragic accident. They will paint Lily as a victim herself, caught in circumstances beyond her control. But the evidence tells a different story. The evidence shows planning, motive, and most damning of all, video proof of what really happened that night." Martin Cross objected immediately. "Your Honor, the prosecution is prejudicing the jury before any evidence has been presented." "Overruled," Judge Brennan said. "Continue, Miss Hart." Elizabeth nodded. "You will see phone records showing Lily researching methods and timelines. You will hear from witnesses who will testify to her state of mind in the days before the murders. You will see forensic evidence that contradicts every claim the defense makes. And finally, you will see footage, recovered from a security camera the family had installed, that shows exactly what happened in that house. When you have seen all of this evidence, there will be no doubt in your minds. Lily Dawson is guilty." She returned to her seat. The courtroom was silent. Martin Cross stood for his opening statement. He looked tired already. "Ladies and gentlemen, my client is a 12-year-old child, a child who has lost everything. Her entire family is gone, and now the state wants to take her freedom as well. Yes, a terrible tragedy occurred. Yes, 3 people died. But the question before you is not whether deaths occurred. The question is whether Lily is responsible in the way the prosecution claims." He moved closer to the jury. "You will hear evidence that paints a picture of a troubled household, a father who was strict to the point of cruelty, a mother who looked the other way, a child who felt trapped and afraid. What happened that night was not premeditated murder. It was a desperate act by a frightened child who saw no other way out." Lily watched her attorney with a slight frown. She clearly did not like being described as frightened or desperate. She wanted to be seen as strong, in control. "I ask you to keep an open mind," Martin continued, "to remember that you are judging a child, not a hardened criminal. To consider all possibilities before you condemn a young girl to spend the rest of her life behind bars. He sat down. Lily leaned over and whispered something to him. He shook his head curtly and did not respond. The prosecution called its first witness, Detective Robert Mason. He was a large man with close-cropped hair and a serious demeanor. He had been a detective for 12 years and had worked hundreds of cases, but this one was personal. Sheriff Dawson had been a colleague and a friend. Elizabeth Hart began her questioning. Detective Mason, can you describe what you found when you arrived at the Dawson residence on the night of October 15th? Detective Mason's voice was steady but somber. I received a call at approximately 11:45 post-meridian from dispatch. A neighbor, Mrs. Helen Kowalski, had called 911 reporting screams coming from the Dawson home. I arrived on scene at 11:53 post-meridian with Officer Jennifer Park. The front door was unlocked. We entered and immediately discovered the bodies. Can you describe the condition of the bodies? Sheriff Thomas Dawson was found in the master bedroom. He had sustained severe trauma to the head, multiple blows that caused skull fractures and massive bleeding. Sarah Dawson was found in the hallway between the master bedroom and the stairs. She also had head trauma, and her position suggested she had been trying to flee when she was struck. Marcus Dawson, age 7, was found in his bedroom. He appeared to have been killed in his sleep. Margaret sobbed in the front row. Judge Brennan called for a brief recess. When they reconvened, Elizabeth Hart continued. What did you find when you located the defendant? Lily Dawson was sitting in the living room. She appeared calm. Her clothing was clean, with no visible blood spatter. When I asked her what happened, she stated that she had been in her room and heard noises but did not investigate until everything was quiet. She claimed she found the bodies and then sat down to wait for help. Did her story seem credible to you? No, ma'am, it did not. Why not? Detective Mason leaned forward. Several reasons. First, there was no blood on her despite the fact that the crime scene was extensive. Second, her demeanor was inconsistent with someone who had just discovered their murdered family. Third, when I asked specific questions about what she heard and when, her timeline did not make sense. The medical examiner later confirmed that all 3 victims died within minutes of each other, which meant if Lily heard something from her room, she would have heard multiple violent attacks happening in rapid succession. Yet she claimed she only heard vague noises. What did you do next? I secured the scene and called for additional units. The crime scene investigators arrived shortly after. We began documenting everything, photographing, collecting evidence, taking measurements. And I began looking into Lily's background, her recent activities, her relationships with the victims. What did you discover? Martin Cross stood. Objection. Calls for speculation. Your Honor, Detective Mason's investigation is directly relevant to understanding the defendant's state of mind and potential motive, Elizabeth argued. I will allow it. Answer the question, Detective. Detective Mason nodded. What I discovered was a pattern of resentment and planning. Lily's phone showed searches for articles about family murders, about crime scenes, about police investigation techniques. Her text messages with friends showed her complaining about her parents, saying she wanted to be free of them. And we found something else during our search of her room. What was that? A notebook hidden under her mattress. In it, she had written out a detailed plan. Times when her parents would be home, when Marcus would be asleep, potential methods. It was all there, in her own handwriting. The courtroom erupted in murmurs. Judge Brennan banged his gavel. Order. Lily sat perfectly still, but her eyes had narrowed. She was watching the jury, gauging their reactions. Martin Cross began his cross-examination. Detective Mason, you mentioned that my client's clothing had no blood on it. Is it not possible that she changed clothes after discovering the bodies? Possible, but we found no discarded clothing with blood evidence anywhere in the house or surrounding property. Could she have disposed of them elsewhere? We conducted extensive searches. Nothing was found. Detective, you also mentioned this notebook. Is it not possible that a 12-year-old girl was simply writing fiction, perhaps inspired by mystery novels or television shows? Detective Mason shook his head. The level of detail was too specific. It referenced her actual family members by name. It included details about the house layout, about where weapons could be found. This was not creative writing. This was planning. But you cannot definitively prove when this notebook was written, can you? The notebook was found within 24 hours of the murders. The ink was consistent throughout, suggesting it was written over a period of days or weeks, not months or years. Martin Cross tried a different approach. You mentioned my client appeared calm when you found her. Is it not possible she was in shock? In my experience, shock presents differently. People in shock are usually dazed, unresponsive, sometimes hysterical. Lily was none of those things. She was alert, composed, and her answers to my questions were calculated. Calculated. That is your interpretation, detective, not a fact. It is my professional assessment based on 12 years of interviewing witnesses and suspects. Martin returned to his seat. He had not managed to shake Detective Mason's testimony. The trial continued over the following days. The prosecution methodically built their case. A neighbor, Helen Kowalski, testified that she had heard screaming around 11:30 ante-meridian and had immediately called the police. She described hearing what sounded like furniture being knocked over, then silence. "Did you hear anyone calling for help?" Elizabeth Hart asked. "No," Mrs. Kowalski said. She was an elderly woman with white hair, clearly shaken by having to testify. Just screams, terrible screams, and then nothing. "Did you see anyone leave the house?" "No. The police arrived maybe 10 minutes after I called. No one came out before that." A forensic pathologist, Dr. Alan Reeves, testified about the nature of the injuries. He described in clinical detail how each victim had died, the force required to cause such damage, the sequence of blows. It was grim testimony that left several jurors looking ill. In your professional opinion, Dr. Reeves, could these injuries have been caused accidentally? Elizabeth asked. Absolutely not. Each victim sustained multiple, deliberate blows to the head, with a blunt object, likely a metal baseball bat, which was found at the scene. The pattern of injuries shows the attacker struck repeatedly with significant force. This was not a fall, not an accident. This was intentional. Could a 12-year-old girl have inflicted these injuries? Yes. The weapon used provides mechanical advantage. A child with sufficient strength and determination could absolutely cause this level of damage. Martin Cross cross-examined. Dr. Reeves, you mentioned determination. Is it not true that in cases of extreme fear, even children can display extraordinary strength? That is true, but the pattern here does not suggest a fear response. A fear response would be chaotic, defensive. These injuries were methodical. As the days passed, the evidence mounted. Phone records showed Lily had made a call to her best friend, Jessica Torres, at 11:15 post-meridian, just half an hour before the estimated time of death. The prosecution called Jessica to the stand. Jessica was 13, with long dark hair and eyes that were red from crying. She clearly did not want to be there. Jessica, can you tell the court about the phone call you received from Lily on the night of October 15th? Elizabeth asked gently. Jessica's voice was barely above a whisper. She called me around 11. She sounded normal. We talked for a few minutes. What did you talk about? Just school stuff. She asked if I was still coming over that weekend. I asked if her parents were okay with it. She said they would not be a problem anymore. She said her parents would not be a problem anymore? Yes. Did you ask her what she meant by that? I thought she meant they had agreed to let me come over. Lily's parents were really strict. They did not like her having friends over much. Did she say anything else unusual? Jessica hesitated. She said she had something to do and would call me back later, but she never did. How did she sound during this call? Scared? Upset? No, she sounded fine. Maybe even excited about something. Lily glared at Jessica from the defense table. Jessica would not look at her. Martin Cross tried to salvage the testimony. Jessica, you and Lily were close friends, correct? Yes. And in all the time you knew her? Did she ever express any real desire to hurt her family? Jessica bit her lip. She complained about them sometimes. But lots of kids complain about their parents. Did she ever threaten violence? Not really. She said stuff like, I wish they would just disappear, or I cannot wait to move out. But I never thought she meant it seriously. So, when she said her parents would not be a problem, you did not interpret that as a threat? No. I thought she just meant they had finally agreed to something. But the damage was done. The jury had heard enough to plant seeds of doubt about Lily's innocence. The prosecution then introduced evidence that stunned the courtroom. A life insurance policy that Sarah Dawson had taken out 2 years earlier, naming Lily as the beneficiary if both parents died. The policy was worth $500,000. Elizabeth Hart questioned the insurance agent who had sold the policy, a nervous man named Richard Pembroke. Mr. Pembroke, can you explain the circumstances under which this policy was purchased? Mrs. Dawson came into my office in August 2 years ago. She said she and her husband wanted to make sure their children were provided for if anything happened to them. It is a fairly common request. And Lily was named as beneficiary? Yes. She was the older child, so Mrs. Dawson wanted to ensure she could take care of Marcus if needed. The policy was set up so the money would go into a trust until Lily turned 18. $500,000 is a substantial amount. It is, but not unusual for a family of that income level. Sheriff Dawson had a good salary, and Mrs. Dawson had been teaching for years. Martin Cross objected repeatedly during this testimony, arguing that the insurance policy was irrelevant because Lily could not access the money while in custody, and furthermore showed her mother's care for her, not a motive for murder. But Judge Brennan allowed the evidence, and the jury took careful note. As the trial moved into its second week, Lily's performance in the courtroom became more pronounced. She would sigh dramatically during testimony she found boring. She would smile at certain jurors, as if trying to charm them. She would lean back in her chair with her arms crossed, projecting an image of casual indifference. Her attorney was visibly frustrated. During one recess, observers in the hallway heard raised voices from the conference room where Martin and Lily were meeting. "You need to take this seriously," Martin hissed. "The jury is watching everything you do." "I am taking it seriously," Lily shot back. "I just refuse to sit there and pretend to be some pathetic victim." That is exactly what you need to do. You are 12 years old. You should look scared, remorseful, anything but arrogant. I am not arrogant. I am just not going to grovel. Lily, they have significant evidence. The phone records, the notebook, the testimony. If you do not show some humanity, some emotion, the jury will convict you without hesitation. They have nothing that proves I did anything. It is all circumstantial. Martin rubbed his temples. We will discuss strategy later. For now, please, just try to look less confident. But Lily would not, or could not, change her demeanor. The prosecution continued building their case. They called a computer forensics expert who testified about Lily's internet search history. In the week before the murders, she had searched for how to clean blood from clothing, how long police investigations take, juvenile sentencing laws, and whether security cameras can be disabled remotely. They called a handwriting expert who confirmed that the notebook found in Lily's room was definitively written in her handwriting, and that the ink analysis suggested it had been written in the 2 weeks before the murders. They called friends and classmates who testified that Lily had become increasingly withdrawn and angry in the months before the murders, often making dark jokes about her family dying or disappearing. Each piece of evidence, by itself, might have been explained away. But together, they formed a devastating picture. The defense tried to counter. Martin Cross called a psychologist, Dr. Linda Chen, who testified that Lily showed signs of trauma and possible abuse. In your evaluation of Lily, what did you find? Martin asked. Lily displays characteristics consistent with a child who has experienced significant psychological stress. She has difficulty expressing emotion, which can be a defense mechanism. She shows signs of dissociation, which is common in abuse victims. Did you find evidence of abuse in the home? Lily reported that her father was extremely controlling and had rigid expectations. She felt she could never meet his standards. This kind of psychological pressure can have severe effects on a developing mind. But on cross-examination, Elizabeth Hart dismantled this testimony. Dr. Chen, you evaluated Lily after her arrest, correct? Yes. So your assessment is based entirely on what Lily told you about her home life? Primarily, yes. Though I also reviewed school records and spoke with some of her teachers. Did any teachers report suspected abuse? No, but abuse is often hidden. Did Lily ever report abuse to a teacher, counselor, or any mandatory reporter? Not that I am aware of. Did you find any medical records indicating injuries consistent with physical abuse? No, but psychological abuse does not always leave physical marks. Dr. Chen, is it possible that Lily simply told you what she thought you wanted to hear in order to build a defense? I do not believe that is the case. But it is possible? Dr. Chen hesitated. It is always possible that a subject is not being completely truthful. No further questions. The defense case was weak, and everyone in the courtroom knew it. Martin Cross was fighting an uphill battle with a client who seemed determined to sabotage her own defense. Then came the moment that would define the entire trial. On the 11th day of testimony, Elizabeth Hart stood and addressed the court. Your Honor, the state would like to call our final witness, Officer Patricia Huang, to authenticate a piece of critical evidence. Officer Huang was a young woman from the police department's technical division. She took the stand and was sworn in. Officer Huang, can you describe your role in this investigation? Elizabeth asked. I was assigned to analyze any video or electronic evidence related to the case. As part of that, I examined the home security system that had been installed at the Dawson residence. The courtroom seemed to lean forward collectively. "Can you tell us about that security system?" The Dawsons had installed a basic system about 6 months before the murders. It consisted of a camera positioned at the front door and another in the kitchen. However, what we discovered during our analysis was that Sheriff Dawson had also installed a hidden camera in the hallway upstairs near the master bedroom. This camera was not part of the official system and was apparently installed without the family's knowledge. Murmurs rippled through the courtroom. Margaret, Sarah's sister, looked shocked. "Why would he have done that?" Elizabeth asked. "We can only speculate, but based on notes found in his personal files, it appears Sheriff Dawson had concerns about potential break-ins given his position in law enforcement. The hidden camera was meant to capture any intruder who made it past the front door." "And did this camera capture footage from the night of October 15th? "Yes, ma'am. It did." "Please describe the footage." Officer Huang took a breath. The footage begins at approximately 11:22 post-meridian. It shows Lily Dawson walking up the stairs from the first floor. She's carrying a metal baseball bat. She walks directly to her parents' bedroom door, pauses for a moment, then enters. The camera angle captures the hallway and part of the doorway, though not the interior of the bedroom. The jury was completely still. Several jurors had gone pale. What happens next? Approximately 2 minutes later, Sarah Dawson runs out of the bedroom into the hallway. She appears to be screaming, though the camera does not have audio. Lily follows her into the hallway and strikes her multiple times with the bat. Mrs. Dawson falls to the floor. Lily then steps over her and walks toward the camera, toward Marcus's room. The footage shows her entering his room. She emerges approximately 60 seconds later and walks back past her mother's body, down the stairs and out of frame. The courtroom was dead silent. Margaret was sobbing openly. "Officer Huang, have you verified the authenticity of this footage?" "Yes, ma'am. We conducted extensive analysis. The timestamp is accurate and matches the timeline established by the medical examiner. The footage has not been altered or edited in any way. The metadata confirms it was recorded on the night of October 15th at the times indicated." "And in the footage, is there any indication that Lily was acting in self-defense or out of fear?" "No, ma'am. Her movements are calm and deliberate throughout. There is no hesitation, no signs of panic or fear." Elizabeth turned to the judge. "Your Honor, the state would like to play this footage for the jury." Martin Cross stood quickly. "Objection, Your Honor. This footage is extremely prejudicial." "The footage is the cornerstone of our case, Your Honor," Elizabeth argued. "It shows exactly what happened. The jury has a right to see it." Judge Brennan considered. "The probative value outweighs any prejudicial effect. Objection overruled. You may play the footage." The lights in the courtroom dimmed. A large screen was wheeled to the front. Elizabeth pressed play. The footage was grainy but clear enough. The timestamp in the corner read, 11:22 post-meridian, October 15th. The hallway appeared empty at first, just a carpeted floor and several closed doors. Then Lily appeared at the top of the stairs. She wore dark pajamas and held a silver baseball bat in both hands. Her face was eerily calm. She walked down the hallway toward the master bedroom. She did not rush. She did not hesitate. She simply walked, like someone heading to brush their teeth before bed. She reached the door, raised the bat slightly, and pushed the door open with her shoulder. She stepped inside and disappeared from view. The hallway remained empty. 1 minute passed, then another. The jury watched in horrible silence. Then Sarah Dawson burst out of the bedroom. Her mouth was open in a scream. Her hands were raised as if trying to ward off an attack. Blood was already visible on her nightgown. She stumbled into the hallway, trying to run, trying to reach the stairs. Lily appeared behind her, still calm, still methodical. She swung the bat and caught Sarah across the back of the head. Sarah fell forward. Lily struck her again and again. Sarah stopped moving. Lily stood over her mother's body for a moment, looking down with no visible expression. Then she stepped over the body and walked toward another bedroom, Marcus's room. She pushed open the door and went inside. When she emerged less than a minute later, her pajamas now had dark stains on them. She walked back past her mother without looking down, descended the stairs, and vanished from the frame. The footage ended. The lights came back up slowly. Several jurors had tears streaming down their faces. One woman covered her mouth, looking ill. The forewoman of the jury stared straight ahead, her expression one of shocked horror. Lily sat frozen at the defense table. Her face, which had been so carefully composed throughout the trial, had gone completely white. Her eyes were wide, pupils dilated. Her hands, resting on the table, had begun to tremble. She looked at the screen as if she could not believe what had just been shown. Martin Cross had his head in his hands. Elizabeth Hart let the silence stretch for a long moment before speaking. Officer Huang, in your professional opinion, does this footage show premeditated murder? Yes, ma'am, absolutely. No further questions. Martin Cross stood for cross-examination, but his heart was not in it. Officer Huang, is it possible that something happened before this footage begins that might explain my client's actions? The footage begins when motion is detected. Nothing happened in the hallway before Lily appeared with the bat. But something could have happened elsewhere in the house? The footage shows what it shows, sir. A deliberate, calculated attack. Martin sat down. There was nothing more he could say. Elizabeth rested the prosecution's case. The defense had no witnesses that could counter what the jury had just seen. Martin called Lily to the stand, a desperate move, but one he felt he had to make. Lily took the stand. She had somewhat composed herself, but she looked smaller now, younger. The performance was cracking. Lily, can you tell the jury what happened that night? Martin asked. She paused. I was scared. My father had been so angry with me. I thought he was going to hurt me. What made you think that? He was yelling. He had been drinking. He said I was a disappointment, that I ruined everything. So you felt you needed to defend yourself? I did not know what else to do. Elizabeth Hart began her cross-examination, and she was merciless. Miss Dawson, in the video we just watched, do you see yourself looking scared? Lily did not answer. Do you see yourself hesitating, crying, showing any sign of fear or panic? I was in shock. You were in shock. Yet you walked calmly up the stairs, entered your parents' room, attacked your mother when she tried to escape, and then went to your brother's room and killed him as well. Does that sound like shock to you? I do not remember it clearly. You do not remember it. How convenient. But the video remembers. The video shows us exactly what you did. You hunted down your family and killed them one by one. I was defending myself. Your 7-year-old brother was asleep in his bed. What possible threat did he pose? Lily said nothing. Her jaw was clenched. And after you killed your family, what did you do? According to the video and Detective Mason's testimony, you cleaned yourself up, changed clothes, and sat in the living room waiting for the police. Does that sound like someone who acted in the heat of passion? I did not know what to do. You knew exactly what to do. You had planned this for weeks. You researched how to avoid getting caught. You waited until your father was asleep, until your brother could not fight back. And then you executed them. No. The notebook found in your room, the one where you detailed your plan, that was just creative writing? I was just venting. Venting. And the life insurance policy? The $500,000 you would receive if your parents died. That was just a coincidence. Lily's face flushed. I did not even know about that policy. You expect us to believe that you did not know about a policy that named you as the primary beneficiary? That you had no financial motive? I did not do this for money. Then why did you do it, Lily? Tell us the truth for once. Lily stared at Elizabeth with open hatred. The mask had completely fallen, away now. Because I wanted to. Because they deserved it. Because I was tired of living in that house with those people who did nothing but control me and judge me and make me feel like I was never good enough. The courtroom erupted. Martin Cross tried to object, but it was too late. Lily had said what she really felt. Elizabeth smiled coldly. No further questions. Lily was led off the stand. She was shaking now, the adrenaline and anger draining away, leaving only the realization of what she had just admitted in open court. Martin made his closing argument, but it was perfunctory. There was no coming back from that footage, from that testimony. He asked the jury to show mercy, to remember that Lily was just a child, to consider that there might be circumstances they did not fully understand. But even he did not sound convinced. Elizabeth Hart's closing argument was devastating. She walked the jury through every piece of evidence, every testimony, every damning detail. And then she played the video again. "This is the truth," she said as the silent footage of murder played once more. "This is who Lily Dawson really is. Not a scared child, not a victim of abuse, but a cold-blooded killer who took 3 innocent lives for her own selfish reasons. The defense wants you to feel sympathy for her. But I ask you to remember Sarah Dawson, who died trying to escape her own daughter. Remember Marcus Dawson, a 7-year-old boy who never hurt anyone. Remember Sheriff Thomas Dawson, who dedicated his life to protecting this community. They are the victims here, not Lily." She paused at the defense table, looking down at Lily. The defendant has put on quite a performance during this trial, smirking at witnesses, playing to the cameras, acting as if this were all some sort of game. But the video does not lie. The evidence does not lie. And now you have heard her own confession, in her own words, that she killed her family because she wanted to. Elizabeth returned to face the jury. "I ask you to find Lily Dawson guilty on all 3 counts of first-degree murder. Give justice to the victims who can no longer speak for themselves. Thank you." The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours. When they returned, the forewoman stood. Judge Brennan asked, "Madam Forewoman, has the jury reached a verdict?" "We have, Your Honor." "What say you?" "In the case of the Commonwealth of Virginia versus Lily Dawson, on the count of first-degree murder of Thomas Dawson, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of first-degree murder of Sarah Dawson, we find the defendant guilty. On the count of first-degree murder of Marcus Dawson, we find the defendant guilty." Lily made a small sound, almost a gasp. Her face crumpled. All the arrogance, all the performance, all the careful control she had maintained for weeks, it all shattered at once. She began to cry, huge racking sobs that shook her thin frame. Judge Brennan scheduled sentencing for 1 week later. On the day of sentencing, the courtroom was packed once again. Lily was led in, wearing the same orange jumpsuit, but she looked like a different person. Her eyes were hollow. She had lost more weight. The confidence was gone, replaced by visible terror. The first order of business was victim impact statements. Margaret took the stand, her hands shaking as she held her written statement. "My sister Sarah was the kindest person I ever knew," she began, her voice breaking. "She would do anything for anyone. She loved being a teacher. She loved her children more than anything in the world. And Marcus, my nephew, he was just 7 years old. He loved baseball and dinosaurs, and he wanted to be a paleontologist when he grew up. He will never get that chance." She looked directly at Lily. "You took everything from them. You took everything from me. I will never hear my sisters laugh again. I will never see Marcus grow up. You destroyed our entire family for no reason other than your own selfishness. I hope you spend every day for the rest of your life thinking about what you have done. I hope the faces of the people you murdered haunt you forever." She stepped down, sobbing. The court also heard a statement from one of Marcus's teachers, who described him as a bright, happy child who loved learning. She described his excitement about a science project he had been working on, a project he would never finish. Finally, it was time for sentencing. Judge Brennan looked down at Lily, and his face was grave. He spoke in a clear, measured voice that filled the courtroom. "Lily Dawson, you have been convicted by a jury of your peers of 3 counts of first-degree murder. Before I impose sentence, I want to address you directly about what I have witnessed during this trial." He paused, making sure he had her full attention. "You came into this courtroom and treated it like a stage. You smirked at witnesses. You played to the cameras. You acted as if this trial were entertainment, as if the brutal murder of your family were somehow a performance piece designed to make you famous. You showed no remorse, no empathy, no understanding of the magnitude of what you had done." Lily kept her eyes down, tears streaming down her face. "Your defense attorney tried to paint you as a victim, as a child who acted out of fear, out of desperation, out of abuse. But the evidence told a different story. The evidence showed planning, calculation, and malice. That notebook we saw, the one you tried to claim was just creative writing, laid out your plan in explicit detail. Those internet searches, researching how to avoid getting caught, how to clean up evidence, those were not the actions of someone acting in self-defense." He leaned forward, and then we saw the video. We saw you walk calmly up those stairs with a weapon in your hand. We saw you attack your mother when she tried to flee. We saw you enter your baby brother's room and end his life while he slept. There was no fear on your face, no panic, no sign that this was anything other than exactly what you intended to do. The courtroom was absolutely silent. Even the reporters had stopped taking notes, simply listening. "What disturbs me most," Judge Brennan continued, "is that even after being caught, even after being confronted with irrefutable evidence, you continued to lie. You continued to perform. You tried to manipulate this court, to manipulate the jury, to make them believe you were something other than what you truly are. And when your own testimony finally revealed the truth, when you admitted on this stand that you killed your family because you wanted to, because they deserved it in your twisted view, that is when your performance finally ended." He picked up a document from his desk. "I have read the psychological evaluations. I have read the reports about your school performance, your relationships, your behavior. And what I see is a young person who is intelligent, capable, and completely lacking in empathy or conscience. You are 12 years old, and you have committed one of the most heinous crimes this county has ever seen." Lily was shaking violently now, her hands gripping the edge of the defense table. "The law requires me to consider your age in sentencing. You are a juvenile, and under normal circumstances, the court would seek rehabilitation over punishment. But these are not normal circumstances. You did not steal a car. You did not get into a fight. You systematically murdered your entire family in their own home, and you have shown no genuine remorse for these actions." Judge Brennan's voice grew harder. "Your father was a public servant who dedicated his career to protecting this community. Your mother was a teacher who shaped young minds and inspired children to learn and grow. Your brother was an innocent child whose only crime was being born into your family. And you took all of that away. You destroyed 3 lives because you felt your parents were too strict, because you resented their rules, because you wanted freedom. Well, Miss Dawson, let me tell you about freedom." He stood, looking down at her with an expression of deep moral judgment. "True freedom comes with responsibility. It comes with understanding that your actions have consequences. It comes with empathy for others and respect for human life. You have demonstrated that you understand none of these things. You saw your family not as human beings with their own hopes and dreams and rights to exist, but as obstacles to be removed. You planned their deaths with the same casual calculation someone might use to plan a shopping trip. And then, when you were caught, you tried to manipulate everyone around you into believing you were the victim." He sat back down. "This court has heard your defense attorney argue for leniency. He has asked us to remember your age, to consider that you might change, that you might one day understand the gravity of your actions. But the evidence suggests otherwise. The psychological reports indicate that you show signs of narcissistic personality disorder and a profound lack of empathy. The doctors who examined you noted that you seemed more concerned with how you were perceived than with the lives you had taken. You have spent this entire trial more worried about your image than about the people you murdered." Judge Brennan looked at the court reporter, then back at Lily. "The state of Virginia has asked for the maximum sentence allowable under juvenile law, and after careful consideration of all the evidence, all the testimony, and the nature of your crimes, I agree." He picked up his gavel. "Lily Dawson, you are hereby sentenced to 3 consecutive terms of life imprisonment, without the possibility of parole on each count of first-degree murder. This sentence reflects the premeditated nature of your crimes, the vulnerability of your victims, and your complete lack of remorse. You will serve this sentence in a secure juvenile facility until you reach the age of 18, at which point you will be transferred to an adult correctional facility where you will remain for the rest of your natural life." Lily let out a wail, a sound of pure despair. She collapsed forward onto the table, her whole body heaving with sobs. Judge Brennan was not finished. "I want you to understand something, Miss Dawson. Every day for the rest of your life, you will wake up behind bars. Every day, you will remember what you did. Every day, you will have to live with the knowledge that you destroyed not only 3 innocent lives, but your own as well. The performance is over. The cameras will stop following your story. The media will move on to other cases, and you will be left alone with your actions and their consequences." He looked out at the courtroom, at Margaret sobbing in the front row, at the community members who had come to witness justice being served. "This case has shocked our community. It has challenged our understanding of human nature. It has forced us to confront the reality that evil can come in any form, at any age. But it has also reminded us of the importance of justice. Sarah Dawson Thomas Dawson and Marcus Dawson cannot be brought back. Their lives are over. But we can ensure that their deaths are not meaningless. We can ensure that the person who took them from us is held accountable. He raised his gavel. This court is adjourned. The gavel came down with a sound like thunder. Lily was still crying as the bailiffs approached to take her away. She looked at her attorney with desperate, pleading eyes, but Martin Cross could only shake his head. There would be appeals, of course. There always were. But everyone in that courtroom knew the verdict would stand. The evidence was too strong, the video too damning, the confession too clear. As Lily was led out of the courtroom in handcuffs, she looked back once at the gallery. The cameras captured that final moment. A 12-year-old girl in an orange jumpsuit, her face streaked with tears, her eyes finally showing something resembling awareness of what she had done. The courtroom doors closed behind her with a heavy, final sound. Outside, the media swarmed. Reporters shouted questions at Elizabeth Hart as she exited the courthouse. She stopped on the steps and made a brief statement. Today, justice was served for Sarah, Thomas, and Marcus Dawson. While nothing can bring them back, we hope that this verdict and sentence provide some measure of closure to their family and friends. This case has been difficult for everyone involved, but it demonstrates that no one, regardless of age, is above the law. Our thoughts remain with the victims and all those who loved them. She walked away without taking questions. Margaret stood with her husband and a few other family members, speaking quietly to a single reporter. "My sister loved her daughter," she said, her voice hoarse from crying. "She loved her so much. Sarah would have done anything for Lily, and this is how Lily repaid that love. I just hope that someday, somewhere in that girl's mind, she realizes what she threw away. She did not just kill 3 people. She killed her whole future, her whole life. All for nothing." In the days and weeks that followed, the case became a national talking point. Legal experts debated juvenile sentencing laws. Psychologists discussed warning signs of antisocial behavior in children. The video footage, though sealed from public release, was described in countless articles and television segments. The case of Lily Dawson became a cautionary tale, a reminder that evil does not discriminate by age. Detective Robert Mason returned to work, but the case stayed with him. He had solved it, had brought the killer to justice, but he found no satisfaction in that. 3 good people were still dead. A 12-year-old girl would spend her entire life in prison. There were no winners, only different shades of loss. The house where the murders took place was eventually torn down. No one wanted to buy it, to live in a place where such horror had occurred. The lot sat empty, a patch of grass where a family home had once stood. Years later, some reporters tried to interview Lily in prison. She refused. She had nothing to say, no statement to make, no explanation to offer. The girl who had once played to the cameras now shrank from their gaze. The performance was over, just as Judge Brennan had said it would be. The trial of Lily Dawson entered the legal record as one of the youngest defendants ever convicted of multiple first-degree murders in Virginia history. It was studied in law schools as an example of how video evidence can be used in court. It was discussed in psychology courses as a case study in juvenile psychopathy. It was referenced in legislative debates about juvenile justice reform. But for Margaret and the rest of the family, it was simply the end of a nightmare that had destroyed their world. They gathered each year on the anniversary of the murders to remember Sarah, Thomas, and Marcus. They shared stories, looked at photographs, tried to keep the memories of who these people really were alive in a world that would forever remember them only as victims. The small memorial garden they established in Eastville's Central Park became a place where people would leave flowers, especially on the anniversary. Parents would bring their children there and hold them a little tighter, grateful for one more day with their families intact. In the juvenile detention center where Lily spent her first years of incarceration, the staff reported that she kept mostly to herself. She attended the required classes, but rarely spoke. She ate her meals alone. She went through the motions of existence, but seemed to be somewhere far away in her mind. When she turned 18 and was transferred to the adult prison, nothing changed. She was polite to guards, avoided conflict with other inmates, and spent most of her time in her cell. She was a model prisoner in behavior, but those who worked with her noted that she seemed emotionally frozen, as if some vital part of her had shut down the day the verdict was read. The Eastville Police Department dedicated a memorial plaque in Sheriff Dawson's honor. It hung in the main lobby of the station, and new officers were told his story as part of their orientation. Not just about how he died, but about the kind of officer he had been. Fair but firm, dedicated to his community. Someone who believed in justice and worked every day to make his town a safer place. Sarah Dawson's third-grade classroom at Eastville Elementary was renamed the Sarah Dawson Learning Center. Current and former students created a mural on one wall showing a smiling woman surrounded by children and books. Her legacy lived on in the hundreds of students she had taught over the years, many of whom went on to become teachers themselves, inspired by the woman who had made learning feel like an adventure. And Marcus, though his life was cut short, was remembered by his Little League team. They retired his number, and each season they gave out the Marcus Dawson Sportsmanship Award to a player who demonstrated kindness, enthusiasm, and love for the game. His teammates grew up, graduated high school, went to college, but many of them never forgot the small boy who had loved dinosaurs and dreamed of discovering fossils someday. The trial itself became a turning point in conversations about juvenile justice. Some argued that Lily's sentence was too harsh, that no child should be condemned to life in prison regardless of their crime. Others argued that the sentence was appropriate, that some acts are so heinous that age cannot be a shield against consequences. The debate continued in courtrooms, legislative chambers, and dinner tables across the country. But in Eastville, the debate felt more personal. These were their neighbors who had been killed. This was their sheriff who had been murdered in his own home. This was their teacher whose life had been stolen. And so while the rest of the country argued about legal theory and policy implications, the people of Eastville simply mourned and tried to heal. The courtroom where the trial took place eventually hosted other cases, other dramas, other moments of justice being pursued. But those who had been present for the Dawson trial never forgot it. The footage played on that screen, the sound of Lily's confession, the weight of Judge Brennan's words, these memories stayed with them. Some jurors reported having nightmares for months afterward. Court staff requested transfers to other duties. Even the judge, a man who had seen countless disturbing cases, admitted in later interviews that this one affected him differently than others. Because at the center of it all was the uncomfortable truth that a child, just 12 years old, had been capable of such calculated cruelty. It challenged assumptions about innocence, about nature versus nurture, about the very essence of morality and where it comes from. How does a child become a killer? What mixture of genetics, environment, and individual choice leads to such a horrific outcome? These questions had no easy answers, and perhaps that was the most disturbing aspect of all. In the years following the trial, researchers and forensic psychologists studied the case extensively. They examined Lily's childhood, looking for warning signs that might have been missed. They found some troubling indicators concerning behaviors that teachers had noted but not fully understood, moments when Lily had displayed unusual coldness or lack of empathy. But they also found many contradictions, times when she had seemed like a normal, even likable child. The picture that emerged was complex and unsettling, resistant to simple explanations. What remained clear, what could not be debated or explained away, was the video. That footage showed the truth in its rawest form. Not the lies, not the performance, not the manipulation. Just the cold, hard reality of a girl walking up those stairs with murder in her heart and carrying it out with terrifying calm. That video ensured that no matter how much time passed, no matter how many debates were had about juvenile justice and childhood psychology, the facts of what Lily Dawson did would never be in dispute. And so the story ended not with redemption or understanding or hope for rehabilitation, but with simple, unavoidable accountability. Lily Dawson murdered her family. She was caught. She was tried. She was convicted. She was sentenced. And she would spend the rest of her life paying for what she had done. The performance was over. Justice had been served. And in the small town of Eastville, Virginia, 3 graves in the local cemetery stood as eternal reminders of the cost of one girl's monstrous choice.